I'm Veni Markowski. I'm ICANN's VP UN Engagement based in New York. And I have the pleasure of doing a very short introduction because we all know each other. Gale, Brewer, the president of Manhattan Borough, and Fadi, Chehadé, president and CEO of ICANN. Thank you for coming, understanding the weather and the challenges to get here. I also want to thank in front of Gale actually to her people, everyone who actually has been engaged in organizing this at relatively short notice. And to the ISOC New York who are organizing the video recording. Maybe it's not video any longer, but they'll put it on the web. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Gale.
Well, welcome everyone. And the Manhattan Borough President's Office is always a place where you could meet. I am honored that ICANN is here. Thank you very much. The reason I'm honored is that in 2008, as some of you know, we in the City Council had the first hearing on the issue of .nyc. And I won't say it was my idea. It certainly was not. I'm not Al Gore. I don't take credit for things that I don't do. But it was our idea in the sense that we remembered that other cities were all of a sudden talking about it, and I was darned if New York City wasn't going to be one of them. So that's how it got started. And I remember the hearing that this guy named Bill de Blasio came, and he never stayed. He was a member of the Committee on Technology, which I chaired. He never stayed too long, but for that hearing, he stayed the whole time. I was very impressed. And the fact of the matter is, the City of New York, and I know Jeff Merritt is here, has done a great job of implementation. I'm sure Jeff will talk a little bit about the work that Neustar has done. I don't think what's most special about New York, if I may say so, is that at that hearing, we began this discussion of this must be a New York City .nyc. And I believe, although the president will know, that this city is one of the only or one of the few that makes sure that you are a New Yorker, business, nonprofit, or individual, as opposed to any Tom, Dick, and Harry who can participate in .nyc or .berlin or .london or whatever it is. So I want to thank Tom Lonehout for that because he made a big fuss, and to his credit, we carried forth on that policy. And that is something that we're extremely, extremely proud of. So I'm here to welcome you. Please have more coffee. We have lots of food. Very unusual for a government office to have food. I just wanted to know that. And so those of you from other countries, you should know that it is very unusual to have food here. So I want to thank the staff for that and thank the taxpayers because they're actually paying for it. So I look forward to implementation. I know that I've been at many forums. I think Neustar has done a great job of explaining to people the advantages by having some of the founders programs, which you may talk about. So Jeff, it's all yours. Do you want to talk for a few minutes or welcome people or go around?
Sure. Yeah, why don't we, I would love if we could go around and folks could introduce themselves, and then I'll say a couple quick words about sort of the way in which the City of New York's approaching the rollout and implementation of this project. And then and I know Jeff from Neustar is going to sort of walk through some of the details, but Jeff Merritt, Mayor's Office of Technology and Innovation.
Jeff Neuman with Neustar.
Stephanie Duchneau, also with Neustar.
Catherine Winningham, New York City Law Department.
Michelle King, New York City resident and also with Google.
Robert Pollard, Information and Habitat, where information lives, and connecting NYC.
Laura Abasito, ICANN.
Baron, founder of NameSpace.
Williams, CEO of NameSpace.
Andrew Richey, in this context, the chairman of the New York Tech Meetup and the founder of Civic Hall.
I'm David Pashman, General Counsel at Meetup, a tech company based in New York.
I'm Jessica Lawrence, Executive Director of New York Tech Meetup.
Hi, Jim Bonita, Office of Manhattan Borough President. I'm David Sanoff, President of the New York Chapter of the Internet Society, and also I serve on the Future Challenges Working Group called
Tom Lowenhout, Director of Connecting.NYC.
Taylor Cronin, Access Now, it's a digital rights organization.
Jonathan Askin, I'm a professor at Brooklyn Law School.
Chris Mondini with ICANN, with Business Engagement and North America.
Tristan Reyes, New York President, and also Meetup.
I already said who I am.
And I already said who I am.
And I'm Fadi with ICANN.
So I think one of the great things about .nyc is that it truly represents the city, which you can see the sort of diversity of the different individuals here that are all ultimately influencing the way in which the city implements this. And the borough president pointed out, this is one of the few top-level domains that are geographically defined, meaning that only individuals and entities with a physical presence in the city of New York can register them. But I think in addition to that, one of the things that I am particularly proud of here is that this is actually something that is administered by the city of New York, the government. Right, and if you look at a lot of the new top-level domains out there, they're treated more like business ventures. They're oftentimes, if it's a city running it, they may be run by the tourism board or an entity like that, that's somewhat separated out. And one of the things that was, I think, important for us when we came into City Hall at the beginning of this year with the new administration and sort of took over the reins for .nyc is that we wanted to make sure it was actually run out of City Hall. And the reason is that .nyc is obviously incredibly broad in the way that it can benefit New Yorkers, and that what we've realized is as we have worked with various agencies, that everyone can sort of benefit from this. When you're talking to cultural affairs, you see sort of the benefit it can provide to nonprofits or small business services, how small businesses can benefit, and obviously that applies across the board. And so having City Hall actually be involved in this, one enables that we're able to sort of balance all of the different interests that are involved here, maximize the benefit. And I do think also that by having government at the front of a top-level domain, it creates a much more sort of democratic governance process that ultimately, if we do something wrong, it's on the front page of the papers, right? That we can be sort of held accountable, that we have to listen to a lot of different stakeholders, weigh the pros and cons. And what I've really learned in this over the course of this year as we've rolled this out is all of these issues are incredibly complex. And we're talking about things like privacy. There are advocates that are strong on one side saying to protect all of user privacy and not to release anything. And on the opposite side, there's the open government folks that want to put everything out there, right? And that's the beauty of government or city government in particular, as the sort of facilitator of a top-level domain, is that we can balance those out and we can try and find that middle ground. We can also make sure that we're leveraging and maximizing the public benefit here. And so by having government be able to hold on to certain domains, and this is something that Tom has obviously advocated for going back a decade, neighborhood names and things like that, being able to put those aside and develop programs by which the nonprofit organizations can apply, and then we can create community hubs. I think that's something that's truly unique, and that would only happen in a situation where a city government was ultimately sort of guiding the top-level domain. So I'll stop there, and I know Jeff is going to sort of go into some of the details.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, and welcome everyone. And I'm just going to go through some information here. Hopefully everyone can see that. Sorry, Fadi, for making you move. So I'm going to go just into some general information about .nyc and some stats, statistics of how we're doing so far. It's only been a month since general availability, but it's been, as you'll see, a kind of a great success story. A little bit of our message and how we come across to the New York City community. Talk about our marketing approach and some strategy and tactics, just to give you a little bit of insight into how we're trying to market this around New York. So you've heard all the background. In 2008, there was the hearing that Gale was talking about, and the resolution was adopted. Also, it's worth noting that the mayor's office for the past several years has had .nyc and its digital roadmap as one of the key elements, and the administrations have been very faithful to making sure that this comes to reality. Just a little bit about Neustar. Neustar was awarded the .nyc contract through a competitive procurement that actually started back in 2009, I think it was, and Catherine was heavily involved with that. And we were selected, I think, somewhere in 2011, and then finally signed an agreement with the City of New York in early 2012, which was the same time that applications were submitted for the new TLDs. The actual responsibility for oversight over the .nyc agreement is technically, or the contract is technically with the Department of Information Technology and telecommunications, which is do it. But oversight, as you heard Jeff speaking before, oversight is really provided by City Hall and the Mayor's Office. And it's the Mayor's Office of Technology and Innovation, I think is the new name. As you all know, ICANN signed an agreement with the city in January of this year for the administration and operation of the .nyc top-level domain, and we were delegated in March 2014. So a little bit about the timeline as to how the launch happened. We started a Sunrise program, which is required of all new top-level domains, in May of this year. That was a period by which trademark owners could come in exclusively and register .nyc names. Again, for all of our launch phases, just as it is for general availability, you have to be, and we'll talk a little bit more about the Nexus requirements, but you have to be physically, have a physical street address in New York. So that was in May. It was a 45-day period through May and June. We followed that up with a phase for city-affiliated entities to come in and grab their .nyc names. So there were a whole bunch of names that were set aside, names like agencies, you can imagine police and mayor and neighborhood names, business improvement districts were all set aside for cities, for city agencies and city-affiliated entities to come in and register those names. Although it was a defined period of time, the reality is these city agencies and neighborhoods and business improvement districts can come in at any time and claim their name. And they've been doing so ever since July. We also had a land rush that was August and September, which meant that you could apply for a name if there were multiple applications. There would be an auction to determine who would be the ultimate registrant. If there was only one application for the name, then great, then you got it. And then general availability started on October 8th. I'm also going to talk a little bit about a founders program that we had in a couple slides that overlapped with the really overlapped all of the launch phases and is really one of the aspects of .nyc we're the most proud of. And we have the New York Tech Meetup here, which is one of our key founders and with future .nyc, and we're excited to be so heavily involved with Tech Meetup as well. So a little bit, you heard about the Nexus policy. So as Jeff said, we are, and Gale said as well, we are one of the only cities to have a strong Nexus requirement, meaning that you have to have a physical street address in New York. So if you're an individual, a business, a nonprofit, you have to have a physical address in one of the 5 boroughs. And to do this, we're actually doing something that I think is unique amongst registries, which is we're actually validating the addresses as they come in the registration path. So it's not a post check, it's not a self-certification. When the registration comes in real time, we actually validate that it is a valid, deliverable New York City address. It can't be a post office box. Virtual offices are not allowed as well. So we're actually validating this in real time. We also followed up with post checks in case we miss things. Virtual offices are hard to tell on an initial validation check. So usually those are things that are detected after the fact when we get a complaint in. We have a whole complaint process modeled after actually the ICANN who is data accuracy policy, where we have a web form that someone could come in and fill out, and then we have a duty to investigate all of those claims. So we take enforcement of this very seriously because of the unique aspect of .nyc being for New Yorkers. So just some stats for you all. Again, this is just very high level. During the Sunrise process, which was for trademark owners, we got 482 trademark or Sunrise registrations, which actually sounds like a low number, but it's one of the higher amounts for Sunrise processes of any new top-level domain. Most of them are averaging between 50 and 100. I've seen a couple that are 150, but that's kind of rare. 482 has been one of the most that I've seen to date, so that's actually a good thing. Of founders and city affiliated, so during that phase we have about 200 registrations so far that fall into those 2 categories. The founders include business improvement districts. It includes, as we talked about, future.nyc with the Tech Meetup, digital.nyc, a number of geographically and industry diverse founders, such as Bridget Kelly, who is a R&B singer who sang for Jay-Z, Empire State of Mind. Schubert.nyc, which is actually one of my personal favorites because I'm a huge musical theater fan. So the Schubert organization actually rebranded to Schubert.nyc. Chamber, for the Greater Chamber of New York, has Chamber.nyc, and Pickle Day NYC is one of the business improvement districts as well. That was a founders program. Land Rush, we had over 10,500 applications. Of those, 9,412 of them were for, or 9,412 names had one application associated with it. So there was a lot of fear amongst, or a lot of concerns, I should say, that there would be just massive auctions all over the place, and that small businesses and individuals wouldn't be able to get their .nyc names. We're happy to report that over 90% of the names that, or around 90% of the names that were applied for were single applications, and so they all got their names, which is actually a very good statistic. 1,094 names had multiple applications associated with them, and they went for auction. We held all of the auctions in the past month. The last phase of the auctions finished up last week. So just to give you an idea, the top names that went for the most amount of money were marijuana.nyc, townhouse.nyc, kravmaga.nyc, which I just found out last week what that was, cosmeticdentistry.nyc, and you'll see some others. So they're really keywords. They're not names of businesses.
How much did marijuana.nyc go for?
I think that's been reported. So according to what's already public, it's about a little over 60 grand. So, so that was the top selling one. As you can see, though, they're all keywords. They're not really names of businesses. They're not names of, trademark names or anything like that. So it really worked out fairly well in that, the highest sought names, or the names that went to auction, were around the keywords.
I have a quick question, Pat. Just shoot this in here.
Yeah, sure.
A lot of users, people searching the web, type a search into the address bar. And so they're not used to the idea of Brooklyn Hospitals NYC being a different than Hospitals Brooklyn. So has there been any attempt to set up portal sites that would combine those multiple, combinations of second and third level domains to duplicate the functionality of a regular search type in the address bar?
So some of the public resource names have been reserved by the city, and they're not currently in use, but I know some of the thinking, and that's one of the reasons. I'll let Jeff speak, but we have the New York City Advisory Council, which actually Tom is a member of, Jessica is a member of as well.
We're a member too.
And
we're a member.
What's that?
We're a member also.
And yes, Gale and their member Vish and others are members of the council, and I think that's one of the items that they should be talking about on their agenda, is how to use some of these public resource names. So that's really the extent. We haven't really delved into that aspect of it yet. I don't know if you want to add
No, that's
anything.
correct. Not at this point. I mean, we really see this as something that's going to evolve over time, and that the city has an opportunity really to sort of figure out how to maximize this, including.
So I would just suggest that we engage in questions after the end of this.
Okay.
Otherwise, it becomes a dialogue, and let's
Sure.
finish it. I also have some. So.
Oh, okay, great. Happy to answer anyone's. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about. So then we had Land Rush. General availability. So that was first come, first serve. Started on October 8th. We're happy to report that we have over 60,000 registrations as of this weekend. If you look at some of the public sites, they are a couple thousand less because the zone file does not contain, this is a little technical, but it doesn't contain registrations in there that don't have name servers associated with them. So oftentimes when names are registered for the first time, sometimes the registrar doesn't include name servers until something happens with the site. So usually those public sites are a couple thousand names less. But we do have over 60,000 names that are registered. We are the second highest city top-level domain in the world.
Yeah, but that other one had a freebie.
Gale stole my thunder. That's exactly right. Berlin is ahead of us, but Berlin, when they reached 50,000 registrations, decided to celebrate, decided to make free registrations available for a couple days. It turned out that over 75,000 registrations went to about 3 domainers. So
Doesn't count.
yeah, so they're not too happy with running that program, but you know, overall, so I'll say we're the highest TLD, city TLD, but you know, every city top level domain has its own model, and so that's Berlin's. It is the fastest growing city TLD, so every day there are more registrations in .nyc than there are in any other city top level domain, whether it's .london, who comes in second, or .osaka or Tokyo, Paris. There's a lot of cities that actually have their top level domains at this point. And in terms of overall volume, we're 7th. So that includes .xyz, which has the most. Again, they gave away a lot of free registrations. That's their model. But you know, .club and some others. So we're actually very happy of where we are. And the best part about it is it's all New Yorkers. So even though we have these strong nexus requirements, we're still ahead of all the other cities which are open to the rest of the world. So .london, which is next in line, has about 9,000 or 10,000 registrations less, but anyone can register .london from around the world. So there's a lot that's still to come. You know, some name collision, which I won't get into now, but there's a bunch of names that had to be reserved for technical reasons. Those will, in early 2015, we're looking at releasing those. We'll announce the plans to do that shortly in the next coming few weeks. We're going to have some premium name auctions, so certain names like pizza.nyc, restaurant.nyc, bagels.nyc have been reserved for auction. So those we'll start auctioning those off in early 2015 as well. And finally, release of 2 characters. So the ICANN rules currently prohibit the release of 2 characters because of some discussions that took place with governments and country codes, that 2 characters in a lot of top-level domains could be considered, in theory, confusing to country codes which have 2 letters. So us.nyc you know, has been prohibited, but we're hoping to get those out there to the world in the coming months. Just, and I know there's a lot of people questions, so I'll kind of breeze through some of the marketing that we've done. You know, really the messaging that we're sending out is New York City is the proof of registrant success. It captures all that New Yorkers have earned. It's a place where success takes many shapes and where there are infinite ways to dream big. The custom web address puts the power of the city in the hands of any New Yorker. And so our tagline, what we say is own it. You know, so our main website is ownit.nyc. We think it's resonated really well. We have Twitter handles that are NYC Own It, that has a substantial following on social media and has some great posts every day about new NYC addresses that have been registered. Really, our job is to, as being responsible for helping to market the .nyc name, is to not really tell New Yorkers how their TLD should be run or tell New Yorkers how New York City should be. It's really to focus as like a mirror of New Yorkers, to really reflect what New Yorkers already are and the potential of what they can be. I'll skip this just to give you some ideas of some of the strategies. So we're telling our story. We also leveraging advocates and influencers. So the Founders Program was the start of that. And so we've got great founders that help us spread the word, whether it's New York Tech Meetup that we sponsor. We've been sponsoring for the past several months and have been you know, getting our name out there, or it's the business improvement districts. It's like the Flatiron District where we held our launch event. And it's really influential bloggers and others that have been evangelizing .nyc. And obviously to drive registrations and sales has been kind of the marketing approach. We've also highlighted all of our founders as the Tech Meetup. One of the great things about our founders is we have founders in every single borough. And we really tried hard. We had, even though we were only allowed to get 50 founders, we had over 300 applications for founders for .nyc. So we really had a lot to choose from a lot of different industries, whether it's in the food industry, the entertainment industry, the technology community. We really had a great cross-section of the community to choose from. We've been advertising all over New York City. Many of you have probably seen it, whether it's on subways or bus shelters or on newsstands or on flagpoles. We've gotten the word out there. around launch. Our registrars really helped us out as well. And so this is just kind of a sampling of where we appeared. It's a small sampling, but just to show you all that we were around. This is some of the artwork that we had. This is pre-launch artwork that I'm showing you. I didn't have time to actually grab some of the current ones, but basically this was what was on news shelters around, and really we tailored it towards the individual boroughs. So whether it was Brooklyn or Queens or Manhattan, Staten Island or the Bronx, we had different messaging. And so there's some more artwork, and I really want to take some questions. There's some more. And we had our launch event in the Flatiron District, which is one of our founders as well, which was well attended. And some of our founders have already been using .nyc, which is something that's really great. The digital .nyc is something we're proud of too. That the city is actually a partnership between the city and IBM. So it's the Economic Development Corporation or Cooperation, EDC, which actually sponsored it with IBM. It's really a portal for the technology and entrepreneurial startup community. It's fantastic resources on that site. It was the first one really to go with a bang, and it's been heavily advertised all over the place. One of our founders is We Park, and that has been all over New York City. It's one of the largest parking garage companies around the New York City area, and they've been using it. So it's starting to make its way around. And I think I want to end there because I know there's lots of questions.
Thanks. So questions now, and then Fadi speaks, I think would be, yeah, please. Yes, Jolie.
How do you reconcile the nexus requirement with privacy? Do you allow registries to proxy, or how does that work?
Yeah, so .nyc currently does not allow proxy registrations. So we require everyone to put in a valid New York City address, and that is published in the publicly available WHOIS database.
So then a continuous to that question, what happens if somebody registers but then leaves the city? Does he loses or she loses?
Yeah, I mean, the rules are, obviously that's something that, once they leave, and if it's reported to us that they've left, then yes, they would lose the .nyc name.
Any other? Yes.
Who's running auctions, and how much of that money goes to the city?
So the question was, I don't know if the webcast could hear it, but it's who's running the auctions and how much goes to the city. So I'll start with the last question first. So the city gets 40% of all of the revenue from everything that we do with .nyc. So that includes the auctions, that includes all of the registrations and any other service that we launch. So 40% goes to the city. The auctions currently are being run by Neustar with a subcontract out to a third-party vendor named Snap Names.
Jeff, you might talk about how much the city's already made. There was an article about it in the paper.
Do you know the numbers, Jeff?
Yeah, I think, well, at that time, I don't know the current, but I guess as of a couple weeks ago, it was, without counting the auction money, it was about $500,000, $600,000.
Yeah, it was a big surprise.
So yeah, there's more now, but
First quarterly.
Yeah.
yeah. So every quarter we have a payment that's due. There's a minimum that's due every year to New York City. We've obviously exceeded the minimum at this point now for this year. And so it's definitely above 500, probably closer to 700,000.
Have another cup of coffee because we can afford it.
That's coming out of our budget, Andrew Richey.
You said taxpayer,
Just to follow up on the auction question, just how much are we losing to the third party in terms of that auction cost? So 40% of 60K for marijuana would have been, what, 24 for us?
So the 40% that the city gets
is
actually out of the gross. Yeah. So it's
right.
So there's the city's not losing anything out of that.
Well, no, the third party that is doing the auction
is getting it out of Neustar share.
Out of Neustar share.
Out of Neustar share.
Okay.
So the city is not losing any money.
Anyone else? Jolie again.
When the contract was awarded, there was a hearing, and we wanted to look at the contract, and we had to go, I don't know, it's part of the process, but we could go there and we couldn't actually make a copy of it. We had to sort of stand there and they stood us and said, okay, now look at it, and okay, that's all you've got. And so is that contract now public?
Yeah, it's a public document, so we can do that. I'm not sure why at that point in time they made that decision, but definitely these contracts.
City contracts.
Not secret.
Yeah, it might not. Yeah, because it wasn't registered yet.
The only two people who spoke at that hearing were me and Tom.
No,
Oh, you spoke. There were three of us. 3 nuts. Me, Tom, and you.
All right, to follow up, at that meeting, Gale, you called for like there to be public meetings and hearings to discuss.
I was going to say we should do that, and I'm sure that between the city council and the mayor's office and our office, we will have a public hearing. Yes, we will do that soon.
Jeff, you showed some advertisements there. Was there something where they were advertising on the side of New Jersey? I think it made the news, right?
Yeah, so we sell our registrations, as you guys know, through registrars, and registrars ran a bunch of launch promotions. One of the registrars was GoDaddy. They ran they ran a bunch of subway ads, actually kind of clever ones, and then they rented out a barge that ran on the river that faced New Jersey and New York. It actually faced both ways, but it basically said, don't tell New Jersey, New York City's got its own web address, .nyc. And so it was kind of clever. Actually, my favorite one, which wasn't reported, was GoDaddy had one that said, New York City has shared its internet long enough with Boston. Now it's time we got our own. And so it's .nyc. And I thought that one was good.
Thanks a lot. We'll move to...
Gentlemen, you had a question.
Yeah, one of the concerns I have, I mean, it's too late to do anything at this point, but the application that was made was actually changed significantly in a number of respects before the agreement was made. There wasn't any process to respond to that. I'm not, that's more of an ICANN issue.
I think Tom has an answer. Maybe.
No, I don't have an answer. I have a question. Just wondering, in terms of the industry, is mostly like the registrars and such are outside the city. We have very little of that industry here, so all the money keeps flowing outside the city. Is there any program to have, I know there's one registrar at this point, and is there any program that Neustar is involved with to develop local registrars?
Well, we are working with the Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Chamber, to help other organizations become resellers if they don't become registrars themselves. Becoming an ICANN accredited registrar has a lot of responsibility associated with it. There's a lot of things that go along, a lot of regulatory requirements. So we can't force people to become registrars, but we are helping others. We're going to chambers of commerce, we're going to the business improvement districts and other smaller businesses around New York City, trying to help them become resellers. So we're working with certain registrars that have reseller type programs to provide incentives for New York City-based businesses to participate in the registration process. We'd love it if more New York City businesses would become registrars. It's just when we're talking to them, it seems there's a lot of policy requirements and consensus policies and other things that many of these small businesses don't have the resources to understand. It's kind of ICANN's a world in and of itself. And so, like I said, we'd love them to be registrars, but right now most of them are opting to become resellers.
All right. Okay, so now...
Oh, this one in the...
Gentlemen.
I'm just every time.
To whom or how will you release the neighborhood reserved names or other reserved name entities that may try to get it but are not able to?
So what we've done is we've set up an application process. We haven't started that in terms of the window for specific neighborhoods. We plan to start that in the next couple months. But right now, any nonprofit organization can go to, there's a website which is neighborhoods.nyc, and you can file sort of an expression of interest, providing information on your organization, saying that you're interested in a neighborhood name. And then there'll be an open application process that we're envisioning 90 days that going neighborhood by neighborhood, doing outreach to community organizations, enabling only nonprofit organizations or business associations to apply, to put forward proposals for how to create a community hub in their community to maximize sort of the public benefit of that domain. And then we'll have an independent group, essentially a jury that will be deciding on those neighborhood names. We'll have a licensing agreement with the city. So the goal here is really to leverage the power of these names. I mean, Tom also oftentimes talks about this as, piece of the real estate, right? This is the digital real estate of New York City, and we want to leverage those names to get the maximum public benefit. And so doing that in a sort of open competitive process is what we envision.
I have one question about pizza, because we all want our local pizza stores to be front and center. So how does that work with this auction of like pizza or shoe store or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, they're just straight auctions, so there'll be no, or relatively no reserve price, so whatever the market bears for it will be what it sells
So
for.
say, for instance, you're the, 42nd Street Pizza, whatever, so you would have maybe already registered 42nd Street Pizza.nyc, so you're just looking for the one word pizza. Is
Right.
that what the auction would be?
Yep, just the one generic
Because that's where people will go, of course, for the, all right.
One question with that is whether there shouldn't be a public interest requirement that any pizza outlet in the city should have the right to be listed under whatever conditions, rather than Domino's taking it and just...
The worst pizza in the world.
Exactly.
Domino's.
The question is
Horrible.
on the auction, the nexus requirements will require presence or headquarters to be based in New York City.
Nexus requires an office to be in New York City, to be physically located in New York.
So,
Not to name.
Not necessarily the headquarters.
Okay.
Although, actually, if you look at the who is in the NYC contact section, there isn't many of them is just an individual name. There's no indication whether that is actually a business office, and that seems to be a certain weakness.
I think there's only so much we can do, that would be my feeling.
understand.
I mean, just to have this,
But one is, Veni's question is that if somebody moves out and you're informed, then you'll update. But if there's no complaint, and the person has a relatively obscure .nyc address, and they move out, you won't find out.
Yeah.
So why not have a suggestion that you have to recertify yourself every 2 years or 3 years that you actually have a New York City address, as opposed to just letting it mission creep? Because over time, the complaints won't happen, but you'll lose 20-30% of the actual affiliation.
I mean, I think that's something that the New York City Advisory Council can talk about.
that's a good idea.
I think that's certainly that is a new policy. We could talk about how that could be implemented.
Yeah, I think that's why we need a public hearing, we can talk about it at some point.
Ideas, yeah.
I mean, just a recertification that you still comply with the rules.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be reapplied.
Well, I mean, every time you renew a name, you always have to sign a registrant agreement that says you're complying with the rules. So that always happens. And anytime a contact is changed, any of the contacts, we validate the New York City address. So the requirement's already there to inform us. The requirement's already there or the validation's already there in process. So other than that, unless there was some connection we can have to other New York City databases, and I don't even know how accurate that data is necessarily with people moving around, but that's something that the advisory council could, I think, talk about.
So is my assumption correct that people have stimulus to make sure that they exist, because otherwise they may lose their name, and even if they moved out not reporting, they have their own business somehow running under this domain name. They have to make sure that it's still somehow related, because otherwise you may actually take it, right? Are the rules of the name, using the names, like if you move, you don't tell us, you still lose your name when it's time for renewal, for example. So here's the situation. Yeah. I'm registering name, I move out.
Right.
My name is in the meantime generating a lot of money. But I move out, I forget that I need to have an address. So the time for renewal comes, I look at it's an electronic contract, I guess.
Yes, yep.
When I say, I'm not there, if I click I'm not there, I lose my name. So do you have any enforcement on that?
Well, if someone doesn't sign the agreement, they can't register the name.
Yeah.
If it gets reported to us, then we have a whole process
In which
to
you
go
take
through.
the name.
In which we offer, there's an opportunity to cure, so it's not like we just pull the name.
good, yeah.
So we'll basically, it's 30 days, we'll do our investigation. If we find that there's evidence to indicate that they do not meet Nexus, we'll send them a letter. They will have a breach letter. They'll have 30 days to cure. If they don't cure within the 30 days and provide actual evidence that they have a physical street address, then we'll take the name away.
It's just a mailbox. I get it, it's a mailbox at a
No, but
mailing
mailboxes
address.
are
I get it's a
excluded.
but
You can't use a POB.
I know, I get that, but that, I mean, I wouldn't be worried about attrition, I'd just be worried about people selling access to their mailboxes. I mean, how many residents in New York City don't buy a domain name at all, and now have this incredibly valuable asset, which is their mailing address? And the only way to check up is to send them an email and says, here's your code, please type the code into the website, unless you're gonna send out agents, right? But I mean, you're just, the only reason to have your who is totally formalized and proper is because you have to be able to communicate, and you communicate via prior email.
I'll just add,
Open a public
we
comment.
decided to do something different and bold here by having a nexus requirement, right? The easy way out for the city of New York would have just been, let's put up a top level domain, let's see if we can make any money off this, right? Our goal here was to do something different. As a result, figuring out how to do effective nexus enforcement is going to be a process that evolves over time.
Yeah,
And being obviously at this point only, almost 2 months in, at this point there aren't the numbers of registrants to enable an effective sort of crowdsourced enforcement. I think that over time that's going to be a major vehicle here. If you look at a site like Craigslist, right, that enables flagging of users, we think that over time, as more New Yorkers acquire .nyc sites and want .nyc sites, that's going to be the primary way in which we have enforcement, right? I go to register a site and I realize that, you know, my 42nd Street pizza is taken by somebody else. I look on the who is, because there's not proxy registrations there, I can see who has that. I'm able to then say, I think that's actually somebody who's not in New York City, file a complaint, and that's what we think is going to be the primary enforcement vehicle. That said, as time goes on, we're going to learn about how the way in which New Yorkers and potentially folks outside of New Yorkers are trying to work this system and find loopholes, and that's going to enable us to add in new enforcement mechanisms, and that might be, you know, some data analytics and different tools like that. It might be sort of systems by which we require folks on a regular basis to verify their physical address. We'll see. But I think this is sort of a new space, and it's going to evolve over time. We'll get better at it, but we are only in the first 60 days.
Let's move. I mean, Jolie, I know, but I'm concerned about the time. It's 10 o'clock.
This is a critical one, right? The New
Jolie,
York City Advisory Council is the way that the public gets into this. You can't, if you go online and search, you cannot find who's on that council.
Okay.
I've asked to like webcast their things. There's no publicity. Something has to be done about that.
All right, we'll fix that, and we're going to have a hearing.
Okay. Let's have Fadi. Fadi, we've put a topic for you, by the way. I know you don't like topics. And we have 20 pages prepared, 20, not just kidding. But it's ICANN.NYC and multi-stakeholder innovation. That's at least what the people got by email. But I'm sure that people are interested to hear more about, not only about the .NYC policy of ICANN, but in general what is coming out of ICANN these days, what's new. And if there are particular questions regarding the .nyc, Jeff is here, so he can quickly jump in.
Thank you, Veni. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank
you
you,
for inviting me.
Mr. President.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you, all of you, for taking time on Monday. First of all, I'm delighted to have participated in this, and congratulations, really. I'm very, very impressed by the thought process and the energy you're putting behind this. It's superb. And frankly, New York should not be necessarily celebrating that you're number one. New York should be number one. It's easy. This is my city as well. This is where I met my wife, and I had my first son, and I went to school. And I know what New York can do, and New York will do. In fact, when I go around the world and I meet with city mayors, they often ask me, what is New York doing about .nyc?
I love it.
So New York is the reference city, and I believe that you will show that through the success. So good luck to you. I'm very, very pleased. I mean, clearly, just one comment on this. I'm seeing a new and very focused use of new top-level domains for authentication purposes. So I think the Nexus model is fascinating. It's very interesting. I'll give you just one example that is related, not directly, but interesting. The Vatican invited me to come and talk to them about their strategy with .Catholic. You know, they got .Catholic in Latin, Arabic, and Chinese characters. I don't think they got Cyrillic, but I think they got Arabic, Chinese, and Latin. And they were trying to, they got Cyrillic.
Maybe not yet, but they have.
Anyway, they said, please come and we want to share with you our plans with that. And frankly, I was curious, well, what is the church going to do with .Catholic? And it's mostly about authenticating really Catholic institutions. The church, since Gutenberg times, has printed a red book that goes to every authentic Catholic institution, church, hospital, school, affiliated Neuman club type of thing. And that book basically says who's Catholic, essentially. So you could tell, is St. Anne's School in Singapore really Catholic, or is it just a school with the name St. Anne, right? Because also increasingly these schools don't necessarily have a nun or a priest, right? They have administrators. So in fact, in Asia, this is a huge issue for the church. There's a lot of schools coming out with saints' names that are not affiliated with the church. So .Catholic, for the first time in hundreds of years, will replace the Red Book. So they're actually going to move away. And so if you get a domain .Catholic, you are an authentic Catholic institution. They have a 10-year plan around that. Of course, just as you saw the debate around the stable, which is fascinating, they're having a debate amongst the prelates as to, for example, now, if you have St. George's Church Buenos Aires Catholic, and the priest puts his Sunday homily on that website, will someone in Rome be checking whether that homily is adhering to the doctrine? And will all content on all sites .Catholic be checked? Are they going to? So they got into fascinating discussions in Rome recently about that. So every authentication, just like you heard the gentleman there ask, are you going to recheck the addresses, is going to get us into fascinating discussions. And I just wanted to point to you that if you take these types of discussions happening at the level of New York or in the Vatican and multiply it by about 10,000, welcome to ICANN. That's the world of ICANN. And it's fascinating. People think these should be easy, easy. We should make these decisions quickly. But of course at ICANN I don't make any decisions. All of this happens through a complex bottom-up consensus process, which at the end may not please some, inevitably actually at the end doesn't please everyone. But it's the beauty of the system, and it's what it produced. So welcome to our world. It's a very complicated world, and it continues to be fascinating. And I'll finish on that world by giving you a different example, completely different, because I gave you the Catholic example. So we had an applicant for .Islam. The slight difference is that unlike the Catholic Church that has a very clear head and owner, Islam does not have a clear head and owner. So who gets .Islam? So our governmental advisory committee of 147 countries represented basically said, we can't touch this with a 10-foot pole. I mean, we're not going to get into religious issues, right? And ICANN had to figure out how to get out of this one, because clearly even the White House heard from the Saudi government about this, saying we cannot give .Islam to the applicant, which happened to be a company based in Turkey that was backed by Iranian investors, which were legit. But so very complicated issues. I think you're touching a part of it here in New York City. I wish you wisdom and luck in figuring out how to serve the city well, how to balance public interest with, making sure the city gets its money back or at least, benefits from that. These are difficult things to balance in every organization, and especially in a city that is here for the public good and public interest. But I encourage finding a model of participation. At the country level, one of the good models of participation for all the stakeholders in a geography is Brazil. Brazil as a country has done, I think, quite an outstanding job for the last 20 years around the domain .br, which is the Brazil country code. They built a multi-stakeholder body called CGI. You can visit it as cgi.br. It includes government, it includes academics, it includes civil society, it includes technical people, it includes 21 people, and government is not the majority. Government is 9 out of 21, which is remarkable for Brazil. And yet they have built a very, very successful institution, 170 people, 3 million domain names, and really very good service. They, for example, promote Portuguese content and do different things in schools around. And they cooperate with Portugal and some of the African countries that still speak Portuguese. Beautiful, beautiful institution. So I hope the city also finds its way. Brazil is not the right model. It's a model that seems to be working. Armenia is copying it. Lebanon is copying it. Italy is copying it. Many countries adjusting it to their own, their own needs. So I wish you luck in that, and it means ceding a little bit of power for the city, but also gaining a community view, which is always very powerful. So that's it. In terms of, we can talk about anything you want. ICANN is, of course, involved in a lot of things. The two main topics that I'm involved in these days, one is ensuring that ICANN is ready for its independence from the U.S. government contract. That is a pretty intense piece of work. Being independent is what ICANN had hoped to do since 2000, when Ira Magaziner put the papers together under President Clinton and Al Gore. And by the way, this is why Al Gore keeps saying I invented the internet, because in fairness to him, he actually had done something quite important with Tom Khalil in the White House at the time around really making ICANN independent. And that was a very important piece of legislation and frankly visionary at the time to push a lot of that in the private sector. So that's coming to fruition. As Ira told me the other day, he said, you're 14 years late, but finally you're coming to the independence we imagined should have happened in 2000. I think the U.S. government is committed to this. Secretary Pritzker came to our opening in L.A. and asserted and reaffirmed the U.S. government's commitment to this. I think ICANN can always improve its accountability, can always improve the mechanisms by which it manages, and we will. But I think we're ready. The organization is ready. I need to remind you, ICANN is a very strangely put together organization. It's unique, but it's working. Having 147 governments and 30 non-international governmental organizations observe and advise what we do is unique. There is no other place on the planet where that happens. Having the decisions and the policy driven by the private sector through the GNSO is also remarkable. So ICANN has unique features that we should retain and maintain. And I think it's very important to know that our biggest danger wasn't what people perceived as our danger was really that the Chinese were going to announce that they will have their own internet and run away with their own route and leave us kind of as a separate internet. That was the biggest danger we were facing as an organization.
What would happen if they did?
If they did, and it's a good point, if the Chinese separated their internet, I think the internet as we know it, as a single platform to share ideas, to share commerce, with minimum barriers, with minimum friction, because inevitably if they separate their route, we will have friction between the networks. They'll put rules, they'll erect walls. To get into their internet you need X, to get out of their internet you need Y. That's not the internet we all want. We want an internet that's open, as Tim Berners-Lee would say, that information and ideas and commerce and flows through it. So I think it's very important to note that that danger is largely now behind us. The Chinese, I just came from China yesterday, and China has now made clear announcements that they're now supporting ICANN, legitimized ICANN, legitimized the root of ICANN, legitimized the fact that we want one single internet. That's extremely powerful and notable this year.
Congratulations.
Yes, it is a huge, huge step forward for us. Now, we are on watch. I think we are not naive about the importance of this event and the importance of what it means. So in Udhen this week, I was there with the CEO of from New York here of Thomson Reuters, the CEO of LinkedIn, CEO of Qualcomm, and many others. We went to meet with Premier Li, and Premier Li asserted and confirmed again that China is for one global internet. Now, they had never said this before London. One global internet. One internet, one world, Lu Wei said. Now, the Chinese, of course, expect that one internet, one world means they have a seat at the table. And that seat at the table was impossible so long as ICANN is still today, or will continue to be, under a contract with the US government. It was incongruent. We could not tell the Chinese you have an equal seat at the table in one global internet, but yet, sorry to inform you, the route is really under contract with the US government. It just wasn't going to go. So I think this is pretty obvious at a basic level. Now, getting it all done is complicated, and here we are. And the second issue that we're dealing with quite significantly now is what do we do with all the matters of internet governance that are beyond the ICANN's remit and the IETF's remit and the regional internet registries remit and the W3C's remit? All of us have a remit, but it does not cover the full map of internet governance issues. You would say, that's not our business. Let's focus on our little island and do our job well. And there's good logic to that. But the reality is, if the ecosystem of internet governance is not healthy, we are not healthy. We're going to get attacked. So we need the full ecosystem to be healthy. I'll give you an example of that. When we were at the WICET, which was December 2012, the ITU event, some governments stood up and asked for a global treaty on how to manage spam. Imagine that. A global treaty on how to manage spam. And they were being heard. I mean, we were that close to having people start saying, yes, we should start doing something about governing the internet, including spam. In reality, there are a million spam solutions. They exist. We don't need a global treaty for spam. We don't need these environments to be forcing top-down treaties on issues like this. Therefore, it is a danger. If any part of the ecosystem is weak, you will have people pushing for governmental control of that part. We believe governments must have a role in internet governance, but we believe in that role being shared with other stakeholders, being informed and managed by other stakeholders. And hence, ICANN and the Brazilians and now the WEF joined us, and others are starting to join. We're launching this initiative called NetMundial, which is another initiative to enable a platform, a place where dialogue can start occurring on non-technical issues that we deal with today at ICANN and our sister organizations like ISOC, etc. So that's basically, these are the two major issues. I'm going to throw them at the table and then, frankly, engage in dialogue. So I'll let you.
And then David.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So on this larger issue of internet governance, what is your organization doing in regards to the clear examples that have now been shown of surveillance and large data collection by governments themselves?
Yeah.
Which many people believe is breaking the internet.
Yeah.
So to your comment about, you have to be worried about these issues because the ecosystem itself is maybe in danger.
Yes.
It seems to me that is the largest threat to the internet is the issue of surveillance.
Yeah.
Mass surveillance.
Yeah. Spot on, Andrew. So I agree with you. Now, let me make sure I keep making the distinction. At an ICANN level, we're not engaged in that because it's out of our remit. But that's precisely why we think places like that are being proposed, like NetMundial and ISOC and other places, this debate needs to happen. And if we leave that debate to governments alone in an intergovernmental setting, they will have it. They will have a discussion. And I'll give you a footnote just to tell you how scared I am. When Snowden happened, most of my meetings with senior government officials, including national security advisors in big economies, especially in Asia, the message was not, oh my God, they're listening. The message was, oh my God, how come they can do this and we can't? So the reality is that if you leave it up to if we close the discussion to a certain sector, in this case governments, on this particular issue, governments do surveillance. The question is there going to be any participation in how this shapes, so we don't break the internet, by others? And NetMundial is attempting to create that platform where different voices can be heard around issues, as opposed to this debate moving squarely. If we don't provide a place for that debate to happen, it will squarely move into existing multilateral intergovernmental organizations. There's just no other place. For God's sake, they tried to get spam to be run by a treaty.
They weren't really talking about spam. That was about security and surveillance. They just didn't want to say it.
Content.
But the point precisely, that they wanted to open the discussion that, look, we need governments to build treaties around this stuff. We need governments to control this stuff. And I think you're right, that they were using this very simple thing, because who could argue that too much spam is bad? But the reality is this was the opening to get in and start building treaties on internet governance issues between governments where we're not even allowed in the room. And this is, I think, a danger. We are, again, very pleased that the Brazilian government backed off that direction after we met with President Rousseff on the heels of her speech at the UN, at the General Assembly. And this is important because when you have a leader in the BRICS starts stepping back and saying, okay, we believe that these multi-stakeholder folks can really solve the issue, that was good. But now we have to provide a solution. We can't just keep telling them, yes, multi-stakeholder. They say, great. You know what happened after the Brazilian president said multi-stakeholder, not multilateral? And she tweeted that after I met her. Then people said, great, where do we go? Okay, we accept that we shouldn't be solving this in the multilateral space. Where do we go? And I said, well, not that I can, because I just do names and numbers. They said, fine, where do we go? We can't have the answer to where do we go vacuous for too long. We have to give people a place where they can start coalescing in an open, multi-stakeholder way and solving issues. One footnote on that, Andrew, because I think you'll appreciate this. Here's the danger. I use the term one place. And many people have big antennas going up when I say one place. So, wait a second. Are we talking about some body or some new organization where all internet governance happens? And I agree with them. We do not want a centralized organization where everything happens. It's not going to work. The key is to continue pushing for what we're calling a polycentric model, a model with many centers, a distributed model, right? So ICANN is one of the centers for names and numbers. The W3C is another center for certain XML and HTML standards. The IETF, remarkable center to do other things. We need more such centers. And when you have a polycentric model of internet governance, you need one thing, so that the minister from Rwanda doesn't stand up again and say, this is too confusing, guys. Can we just pull this all under the UN where, I'm a small minister from a small country. How am I going to figure out this polycentric thing? And he's right. Jean Philbert is right. This is too much. It's easier for me to show up, put my flag, and somebody tells me exactly where things are. I have 3 staffers, he says. What am I going to cover? The ITU and ICANN and the IETF and this. And now you're telling me there will be 30 other small organizations solving every issue. Because we want that. We want a polycentric model. It's much better. It's more efficient, it's more effective, and it moves faster, and it doesn't concentrate power. So the answer to his question is we need a map. We need some map so he can find the answers. And he agreed with me, and I'm using him as an example because Jean Philbert is a superb guy, and I met him here at Metrotech. He came for a speech that Beth Novak invited him to do. And he said, we need a map. We, the tens of small governments who don't have the resources of the US government and the European governments, we need someone to tell us, look, you're looking for a child protection policy. Here's 6 that have been implemented. This is which one worked. This is how they worked. This is a network of experts to help you implement yours. That's a map. So one of the first things NetMundial will do is focus on that, is build a map so that we can help people find their way through a polycentric, highly distributed model. Sorry for the lengthy answer, but I hope this helped. Thank you, Andrew.
Beth Novak is wonderful.
She is.
David and then Julie.
I have a question here, and I hope
And
that the answer will be much shorter.
I
think it could
my
be a yes or
apologies.
no type. I'm on the Future Challenges Working Group, and I'm going to bring up the subject of a past challenge, legal challenge, both to .nyc and to ICANN that actually precedes ICANN. So Paul and Markowski's company, NameSpace, were involved with developing top-level domains prior to ICANN, including the .nyc domain, and got involved in some litigation, which is currently now involved with ICANN. So you're new to ICANN, and obviously ICANN should be focused on addressing future challenges, not past challenges. So question is, would it be possible for your legal counsel to meet with theirs and think of some out-of-the-box solutions to the issue so that they can move on and ICANN can focus on the future?
I mean, I'm not familiar with all the details,
Yeah,
but I will certainly talk to our general counsel and see if there is. Look, I want to tell you this clearly. I can't comment if there is a legal situation. I'm not aware of it. I can't comment on it. But let me tell you something quickly on this. We're starting at ICANN to add a dimension to our dialogue with the community, with members of the community, that is truly rooted in the public interest. I'll give you one small example. We have a compliance department that's growing, big compliance department. Their job is, when we get a complaint, to follow it thoroughly and do all of that. And that's good. Operationally, we are handling 5,000-6,000 complaints a month now, like a machine, and we can respond to them. But recently I have asked my team to add to that a dimension of public responsibility. So yes, it's important that we process the complaints. But when somebody comes and tells us that there is a problem with a site selling something bad that is hurting, for example, the consumer, we can say, look, this is not our business. Our contract is being followed. That's one way to answer it. Another way to answer it is to say, look, let's figure out how we can talk to all the parties involved and do the right thing. Take our public responsibility. So I appointed Alan Grogan in that role, reporting to me, to start really addressing these things. So when a very, very esteemed emeritus medical doctor from USC showed up at my meeting in LA, very, very esteemed person stood up, says, look, I have thousands of people complaining about certain sites that cater to, with some health issues, and ICANN should do something about it. Technically, legally, it's not our responsibility. We don't monitor the content. This is almost like saying that the Limousine Commission of New York needs to also monitor what happens in every limo in New York. I mean, it's just impossible, right? I mean, we don't do that. We give a license, we make sure the guy has a valid this and that, but we can't control what happens in every limo. Similarly with ICANN, we may give website names, but we can't control what every one of the billion sites on the planet are doing, right? And we shouldn't. Having said that, we could tell this doctor, thank you very much, sir, but you can go home now. Or we can sit down with him, understand what the issues are, and then engage as a good public servant with other institutions that could potentially help him. And we did that. This is the first time we're starting to do this at ICANN in a very proactive way. And we will continue doing this. So I'm not commenting on this case, but I'm just giving you a sense that we at ICANN need to also very seriously follow our legal requirements and paths and so on, but also combine that where we can with a cachet or at least a very important layer of public responsibility.
Julie?
Yeah, just really quickly.
David, we have 5 minutes. Julie and Dave.
I'm Jolly McPhee. I'm with the Internet Society New York. So I didn't introduce myself earlier.
Yes.
I've got a couple of questions from our members that couldn't be here.
Please.
One of whom is Avri Doria, who is the winner of the Multistakeholder.
Yes,
Ethos Award.
we know Avri well. Yes.
So she notes the Montevideo, meetings, declaration with the ISTAR group,
Bless you.
and how that presented a sort of unified front,
yes.
Which led to NetMundial and how that all worked.
Yes.
And how that has been kind of shattered recently with the thing going with WEF. After the first WEF meeting,
yes,
there was people said this isn't the NetMundial that we voted for, that
yes.
we agreed on. And in fact, they agreed to change the name at that moment. And now it's back to being the NetMundial, but we still don't see it. We see, and as you say, people's antenna go up on that one place thing.
Yes.
So ISOC has issued a statement saying that they're not happy with it.
Yes.
So, so Avri asked, did you consult with the other ISTAR people before you went ahead with this whole thing? And listening to our conversation, Evan Leibovich asks, what lessons can be learned from the ISOC reaction to what you
thank you, and thank you, Avri, for the question. Look, yes, I have consulted with the ISTARs on our count about 4, possibly 5 times since Sao Paulo about this. And in fact, the changes we made to the recent NetMundial announcement are a result of feedback we received, much of it actually from ISOC, to improve things and to separate the WEF initiative from the NetMundial initiative, which we have done. So for clarity, there are now 2 separate initiatives. There's a WEF initiative, which is their own, and it's good that they have an initiative. For example, in Davos, there will be a very important plenary session that will be moderated by Angela Merkel, including some major CEOs of our internet companies, to discuss, frankly, how do we go forward with privacy. This is good. If these folks can at least have these dialogues at that level, I think it serves all of us well, because to date, internet governance has not been part of that dialogue. So now it is, and that's a good thing. But that's the WEF activity, and we thank them for it, and we wish them good luck with it. We just hope that it is informed by the great experiences we have. And that's why I will remain somewhat in the background of this to support it, to help it, because we think it's good that it remains informed by our great experience building the internet over the last years. Now, separately, we have the NetMundial initiative, which is a grassroots, bottom-up initiative. And nothing is decided in that initiative other than to create an empty canvas and a platform. No projects will be decided to be funded. We will not be deciding what project is there, what project is not there. It's all bottom-up. It's actually a complete new exercise of crowdsourcing the governance issues. And again, these don't touch on our technical areas because that's already working. This is really to start the dialogue, as I said, on the non-technical issues that need to be addressed. I'm certain that continued dialogue with the Internet Society, with our friends across the spectrum, will lead to hopefully better alignment as we move forward. But we are engaged with them, and we will continue to be engaged with them. And I'm certain that with better clarification, better understanding, better cooperation, we will be fine. One last comment on this, Jolly, that I'm sure this will be on the website, and I want to make sure people appreciate. There were some questions whether the NetMundial initiative has any link or impact or direct role with the transition of ICANN into independence. And the answer is no. There is no linkage. These are 2 completely separate things. Of course, as I said before, if the ecosystem of internet governance is healthy, it helps ICANN. But there is no linkage between these 2 activities. They're completely separate. And in case anybody's worried about the transition, let me note that Secretary Pritzker has personally nominated herself to be on the NetMundial board. So if there was concern on the part of the US government that NetMundial is, potentially going to cause issues to the transition, I think these concerns should go away by understanding.
This leads me to my second question, which is from our member Danny Younger. And he says, I'd appreciate getting Fadi's take on the Defending Internet Freedom Act of 2014, which you obviously know.
As I mentioned to Tom, I think earlier, we do not comment on domestic policy. We stay a little bit out of that. We are a global organization, and I think it would be prudent of us not to comment on domestic policy.
Okay,
I do, however, really want to commend the support the US government as a whole, from all sides of the spectrum, has for the multi-stakeholder model. It's quite remarkable. Our government on all sides of the spectrum, from the most right to the most left, has been very supportive of a multi-stakeholder model of internet governance.
We know that. All right, and then this is my question, okay, which is we have a very large LGBT community in New York.
Yes.
And there's been a lot of disappointment and disillusionment
Yes.
with the community evaluation process.
Yes.
Is there a chance of .gay getting re-evaluated? Are you changing the rules? How's that working?
Let me clarify this once and for all. The applicant for .gay who applied for the community app is still in the running. They applied for a community application and their community status didn't pass the requirements of an independent evaluator. We're not the evaluator. So an independent evaluator looked at it and said that the definition they have of their community does not pass muster. So they're still in the running, and they can hopefully, someone will get .gay, and I hope they are participant and a successful one.
Are you reviewing those rules in the light of that?
I cannot comment on an application's review, but the rules have worked on all the other contentions, and they should work here too. ICANN has a very open policy. In fact, we're one of the most supportive companies of the gay community in our policies, in our approach, and we will continue to do so. This is nothing, about gays. This is a process, and the process should carry on, and hopefully they will be successful.
We have a couple of questions on Dave, but very quickly.
I'm going to throw them really quickly. I'm just going to put
Please.
them out to have them on the table.
Certainly.
And we can follow up some other time, especially as I'm a reporter, so I can chase you down. First, if 6 people around this table who have serious experience in internet governance wanted to be part of the bottoms-up in NetMundial, how could they, today, next week, get actively involved?
Yes.
Yeah, not just talk, but in decision-making.
Yes.
Okay. Second, we have Republicans and many others in the U.S., starting with Danny Sepulveda, who says that things that might happen in governance, including at ICANN, could affect freedoms, particularly freedom of speech.
Yes.
So that's a big issue over here. The question I have, is there anything likely at ICANN or even plausible that would affect freedom of speech? And the third, Ellie Noam totally disagrees with you about the internet, Columbia professor, well respected. He thinks the internet is a network of networks.
Yes.
And he believes, and I'm sure he's right, that if the network of networks was robustly interconnected,
yes,
that would work just fine.
Yes.
So that if Britain, for example, decided to shut down terrorist websites and took and put anything there for mention Snowden in the category of terrorists, which a government official would like to do, that's fragmenting by the way you talk. I'm deliberately using Britain instead of China. What is wrong with Ellie's idea that as long as you interconnect widely with everybody else, that's still the internet, and what you're calling fragmentation is irrelevant. In fact, he thinks it would be a good thing. So people could innovate in different kinds of internet.
He's superbly right, but I will focus you on his words. Robustly connected, not weakly connected with filters and barriers and frictions. So his theory is correct if the network of networks has robust open connections between the pieces of the network. So our worry is not what happens within a network. The French president announced 3 weeks ago he's shutting a whole bunch of sites, inciting French citizens to join ISIS. It's not my call to tell him what to do. It's an issue between him and Orange because there are legal issues. But the issue we have, precisely, he is right, that if the connections between all these networks start getting friction with highly complicated barriers, like who can enter that part of the network and who can't, under what rules. On the question of NetMundial, your first question, the most important thing that will happen in NetMundial is people coming together to address an issue. And that is completely open today. You can go on the NetMundial site, 6 people here can say, we want to address the issue of how cities can ensure that nexus policies work, right? And if they gather and they all agree to do this together, they can do that on the NetMundial site. There's no one telling them your issues out of discussion. And if they need money for that, they can have these issues funded this way. I think your middle question, someone help.
The freedom of speech and how
that's a big issue in American politics.
Certainly.
That ICANN could restrict freedom
Certainly.
of speech.
Yes, look, first of all, ICANN is not involved in content matters. We have absolutely, even the who is content is not with us. We don't own it. It sits on the websites of the registry and registrar. So we have no content per se. We do not get engaged in takedowns, which would limit freedom of speech in one place or another. So we're not engaged in that. Therefore, ICANN itself has no direct role of any shape in issues of freedom of speech. Having said that, we as an organization join the public community in saying, and ISOC and others in saying, we want an internet where people are free to do what they need to do. So we support the principle, and we supported the NetMundial principles that came out of Brazil, in which freedom of speech was central. So we do support the concept, but our work, our day-to-day work, does not touch on these areas.
Jeff,
please.
To add on the fragmentation, one thing I want to draw people's attention to, and I've been involved in this world for way too many years that I remember this. Back in '98 through 2000, the multi-stakeholder model we had at the time did discuss this issue in great detail. Came out with ICP1, and you could probably find it on the Internet Archives. But it was out of that multi-stakeholder model, out of that policy model, that we decided as a community it was better to have one internet, one root, one internet. So I don't want to make it sound like, and I don't want Fadi to be defending, basically making it sound like this is ICANN as an organization's decision. This is something that the community discussed back then. I was around for those discussions, and I remember them. It was very heated, and all these discussions and points that people are raising were brought up back then. And if multi-stakeholder model means anything, we shouldn't just change that because some people feel, and I understand the Columbia professor may be absolutely right, but that's why you have to all join the multi-stakeholder model. If there's something wrong with it, you have a place to go where we can discuss it, make improvements to it, and change it. And that's the beauty of ICANN.
Well, I want to thank Mr. President for joining us. This is a fascinating discussion. I must admit, for all my years in this topic, I didn't really know anybody from ICANN. So it's very exciting, just an amorphous body that met all over the world. And we used to say, who are they? So now we know how fabulous you are, and we appreciate you making the effort to come and to join us. And we look forward to further discussions, and we will work locally with the mayor's office and with Neustar and others to try to have more local dialogue. Thank you very, very much.